Hello everyone and welcome to another video. So for today's video I'm going to be continuing my 60th anniversary TV story rankings with a ranking of every 6th Doctor TV story, from the Twin Dilemma to the Ultimate Foe. So without further ado, let's get started. Right, so here is the tier list. We're going to be starting with a very interesting, shall we say, story, with an interesting reputation. The Twin Dilemma. I'm sorry for anyone who really likes it. I know there's a few people that like it, but I just don't personally. I really don't think it's a great start for any Doctor's era, but especially not the 6th Doctor's. I feel like, really, to be honest with you, with the amount of hassle and difficulties they went through just to try and get the Twin Dilemma made, I don't really feel like it was worth it. Like, the final product was not really worth all of that hassle. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a bold idea to have the 6th Doctor's final story be at the end of the 5th Doctor's final season. So it's a very bold idea by J&T, but I just feel like if it's going to result in a story that's got as many different problems as the Twin Dilemma has, then I don't really think it was as much of a good idea. Interestingly enough, if Peter Davison stayed on for another year, a topic I handled in my previous video, then the whole idea of having the 6th Doctor's first story at the end of the 5th Doctor's final season would make a bit more sense, because with the 1985 hiatus and everything, then at least the audience would then have some way of getting to know the 6th Doctor before the hiatus, like before the show was put on hiatus for 18 months. But as it is, that's not what we got, and yeah, it's just, I think you can tell that there's been a lot of problems with the Twin Dilemma's script and stuff. You can tell there's been issues there. You can tell that it just doesn't really know what it wants to do. And it is, even though a 4-parter is not very long in terms of classic Doctor Who, the classic series, I feel like it is just stretching out what is a very bare bones, very basic story in the Twin Dilemma. Pretty much like Galaxy 4 to some extent, really. I feel like the Twin Dilemma could have just been an episode or two long at most, and that'd be it. Because everything else everything about it just gets dragged out, and it just does not help me to enjoy it very much. Colin Baker is certainly the highlight of this story. I mean, the 6th Doctor gets off to an incredibly unlikable start. He's really not very likeable to begin with, and he strangles Perry and everything, which is so, I don't even know. Yeah, that's just awful that he does that. But I do like the idea of, of what Colin Baker himself once said, of giving the Doctor, kind of imagining the Doctor as like peeling different layers of a banana, and trying to find out more about him, and and just, instead of just doing the usual same old hero kind of stuff of, oh, he's a hero, or he goes through time and space fixing things and stuff. It's much more, he's a much more layered character, and that is, I think, a really good approach. I just think it's a real shame that Colin wasn't really given much of a chance to actually develop that and give that an actual shot. So we just ended up with this instead. So yeah, I feel like that is all I can really say for the Twin Dilemma, which I've obviously put in awful. If you disagree with that, that's completely fine. yeah, I mean, everyone has their own opinions on every single Doctor Who story, and yeah, it would be completely boring if everyone had the exact same opinion, really. So yeah, now we're on to season 22. Right, so we're now on to a much better story, Attack of the Cybermen, which I'm going to put in great. It is a massive continuity minefield in terms of just how many continuity references there are throughout it. Um, but I feel like beyond that, it's a great story and would have made for a much better introduction for the Sixth Doctor than the Twin Dilemma did. Um, so yeah, even though I mean, like I say, it really does rely far too much on the show's past, and includes references to I think pretty much, if not every previous Cyberman story, then at least a good chunk of them, maybe even most of them. So yeah, it shouldn't really work in terms of that, but I feel like it still works quite well. And yeah, it fits the 45-minute episode format quite well. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of violence in this and a lot of the other season 22 stories, but you know, sometimes you could say that's kind of justified in a show like Doctor Who, where there's a lot of what a doctor is in a lot of dangerous situations and stuff like that. So um, yeah, it is what it is, I suppose. Um, Vengeance on Varos, I'm gonna put that in GOAT. Yeah, I really love this story. I think it's probably my favourite Sixth Doctor story, actually, TV story anyway. Um, yeah, I love how it's kind of satirizing the then kind of like in the mid 80s, around about this point, the whole video nasties sort of stuff, them first few VHSs that came out where there was a lot less censorship on like horror films and stuff like that. So yeah, I love how Vengeance on Varos kind of in a way satirizes that and kind of just plays on that kind of stuff. And yeah, again, it's very, very violent, but again, as Eric Saywood himself said, if you're going to show violence, show it to be real, or at least somewhat realistic anyway. So yeah, I think that's fair enough. And then what do we come to then? Oh, the Mark of Irani. I'm going to put that in good. It's a good introduction for the Rani, played brilliantly, by Kate O'Mara, and it's nice to have Anthony Ainley back as the Master. And yeah, them along with the Sixth Doctor have some great rapport and banter and just bickering between each other, and it is just great. Yeah, it's really great to see three renegade Time Lords, just sparring against each other, really. Um, and yeah, it's kind of got a nice pseudo historical setting, all about is it George Stevenson? Yeah, George Stevenson and the Luddites and stuff like that, and that's interesting. Period of history that you don't often hear. You don't often hear that much about in some ways. So yeah, that's quite nice. Yeah, it's nothing special, but it's pretty good. Yeah, a solid outing for the Sixth Doctor. Then we get to the Two Doctors. Gonna put this in Meh. I think at 3 45-minute long episodes, it's a bit too long for its own good, really. And yeah, it doesn't need to be that long, ultimately. It's an interesting multi-doctor story in that, it's called The Two Doctors, but really, to be honest with you, the second Doctor doesn't have that much to do in it, although it's still nice to see Patrick Troughton in the show one last time, along with Fraser Hines as Jamie. Lovely to see the two of them back together again. But yeah, the second Doctor really doesn't do that much, really doesn't interact with the Sixth Doctor that much, but What little we get, again, it's nice to see the usual kind of bickering and bantering between the two different doctors and stuff. Um, yeah, it's a decent story for the Sontarans as well. The Androgums are an interesting kind of concept for a alien race, and just this whole kind of like vegetarian promotion of a vegetarian diet for as a whole for this story. Yeah, it's well, it's quite an interesting sort of like area for Doctor Who to go in. Really, I mean, um, yeah, I'm not a vegetarian myself, but yeah, it's certainly very different sort of thing for Doctor Who to be tackling. But why not, really? Um, then we get on to Time Lash. Um, yeah, sorry, awful again. Um, yeah, there's just very little that redeems this story in my eyes. Um, the whole idea of like time back to a previously unseen adventure with the Third Doctor and Joe, that's a strange but sort of interesting idea. Slightly different, but okay, fair enough. But yeah, it's just you can tell that they didn't have much money to put into it at the end of the day, and yeah, that was sometimes that's just the make or break with classic series Doctor Who. If they had the money in for it, then great. If they didn't, then well, not great, really. The Borad is fine as a villain, but nothing really to write home about. And Perry, uh, she doesn't really do much. She just screams at that monster for a bit. I can't remember the name of it. Um, but yeah, and H.G. Wells element. I mean, that's again very strange, but kind of I suppose it makes it feel a bit more like a traditional Doctor Who story, if nothing else. Um, but yeah, I would have much rather have taken Glenn McCoy's original idea of involving the Daleks over what we eventually got with Time Lash. So then we're on to Revelation of the Daleks, which is another GOAT, greatest of all time. Yeah, just great. I mean, I don't. I kind of see why Eric Saywood wanted another go at the Daleks after him not being completely satisfied with Resurrection, but I feel like Resurrection was really good. Um, but Revelation is also really good. Don't get me wrong. The only real bug I have with it is I do not like the Dalek voices in it very much at all. No offense to Roy Skelton at all, but I just don't like how high pitched they are, really. Although they're still better than the bizarre ones we got in Day of the Daleks. So yeah, at least they're not as bad as that. Um, but yeah, very very dark story. But I don't mind that really. In some ways, I feel like that's something that I wish the show could have continued in some ways. Maybe toned it down a little bit. Because in Revelation, Vengeance on Varos, Attack of the Cybermen, there is a lot of violence that I don't, as I say, I don't mind, but I think could have maybe been toned down just a bit. Um, but yeah, as it is, Revelation of the Daleks is great story. Terry Malloy once again on top form here as Davros, and his great, and him and Colin Baker have a great kind of back and forth with each other, and that's brilliant. Shame that it kind of doesn't really go on for um, longer. Really, I feel like I would have liked to have had more scenes with the Sixth Doctor and Davros just sparring against each other, but yeah, very good, very dark story, and yeah, it's a real shame that the 1985 hiatus happened, and then, the production team decided to try and go for a lighter touch, which is not necessarily inherently a bad idea. I mean, I quite like the Graham Williams era for that, but yeah, I feel like they were getting onto something in season 22, which I feel like could have done, as long as it was toned down a bit, it would have worked quite well, I think. But it wasn't to be, obviously. Right, so unfortunately now we're coming towards the end, with the Trial of a Time Lord season 23. So the mysterious planet, just meh, really. Not a terrible story by any means, but just nothing particularly special. Nothing very notable, really. The revelation that the planet Ravlox is actually Earth, that's quite shocking, quite interesting, and yeah, how that ties into the whole rest of the season with, the dark, dirty secrets of the Time Lords and stuff. That's quite interesting. And the introduction of Sablon Glitz and his associate Dibber, I think it is. That's quite good. They make for a nice classic Robert Holmes like duo. Yeah, it's nothing brilliant, but it is decent enough. Yeah, not one of Robert Holmes's finest work by any means, but by no means one of his worst either. So yeah, just somewhere in the middle ultimately. And then Mind Warp, considerably better. Put that in great. Yeah, a great dramatic end for Perry, or at least that's what we're led to believe anyway, that Perry dies. Yeah, Brian Blessed as King Yrcanos. I mean, Brian Blessed is just playing Brian Blessed basically. But why not really? And yeah, it's great to see Syl back. Would have loved if he'd have returned more to the show. But yeah, great to see him back all the same. Great to visit his home planet, I think it is, of Pharos Beta. Yeah, pretty good. And then Terror of the Vervoids, again, probably, yeah, meh, again. Just, again, nothing terrible, but nothing too special. Just a fairly run-of-the-mill Doctor Who story, ultimately. If you just remove the trial parts, it is basically just, yeah, very traditional Doctor Who story, but there's nothing wrong with that. The Vervoids are quite an interesting villain, actually. I would have liked to have seen more of them, actually. And I feel like the Terror of the Vervoids as a whole is a bit underrated in some ways. But yeah, it's nothing too great or anything like that. But yeah, and then the whole Doctor seemingly committing genocide at the end. I mean, that is like really shocking. Again, yeah, they were really trying to up the ante when it came to the dramatic moments throughout this season. You could have a debate about whether it all worked or not, but they certainly tried their best anyway. Yeah. Then the Ultimate Foe. I'm probably going to put this in meh as well, actually. Actually, do you know what? I'm going to maybe be a bit controversial here. I don't know. I'm going to put Terror of the Vervoids in good. Yeah, because actually, I do have a slight soft spot for it in a way. I still wouldn't say it's anything too special, but yeah, I would say it's reasonably okay to good. Yeah. Anyway, back to the Ultimate Foe. Again, nothing too special, but a it could have been a much better end to the Trial of the Time Lord, certainly. And it is very limited in what I can do in just two episodes, two 25-minute long episodes. But it does what it can to wrap everything up in a not in a satisfying way, because it's not very satisfying, but a decent enough way, I suppose. Nice to have the Master back again. And the whole revelation that the Valiard is actually an evil amalgamation of the Doctor's future. That's very interesting. But it doesn't really do much with it, and I feel like Big Finish since have done a really good job in kind of elaborating a bit more on that, and yeah, done a really great job with that. The whole Matrix scenes, well, the Deadly Assassin did it better basically, but you know, they're fine, they're okay. They try to create this atmosphere of something a bit dark, a bit sinister. It doesn't quite work as well as, like I say, the Deadly Assassin did when that tried to do it, but it is what it is. I feel like it would have been better if we'd have had Eric Saywood's version called Time Inc., but you know, obviously because of the various difficulties that arose, various arguments between him and John Nathan Turner, that isn't what we ended up with. So yeah, I just, to be honest, whenever I rewatch the Colin Baker era, I just feel sorry for him. I really do, because I just feel like, just as an actor, he deserved so much better. And, you know, he said how he wanted to be the longest running Doctor, and I feel like he should have been, quite frankly. And I just, I wish we'd have gotten more from him. I really do. I enjoy Sylvester McCoy's Doctor a lot. I really do like the Seventh Doctor, and I really do like his era. But you know, if we'd have had to have sacrificed that for more Colin Baker, I would have gladly taken that in some ways, because Colin just needed the right. He needed a proper chance to really show everyone how good of a Doctor he could be, and I'm really glad that Big Finish have since managed to rectify that and show just how good the Sixth Doctor can be. Unfortunately, obviously, with this just being a ranking of every TV story for every Doctor, we can't really rank Big Finish or anything. Although I haven't really listened to much of his stuff on Big Finish, unfortunately. But The Last Adventure, I will give it like a special mention to, if nothing else, because yeah, that just gives a very much better, much more satisfying conclusion to the Sixth Doctor's era than the Ultimate Foe could ever do, really. And yeah, he gets a proper heroic, honourable departure in The Last Adventure. In the brink of death is the final part of The Last Adventure. That's a great way for Sixth Doctor to go out. Just a shame that we didn't get something like that on the TV show itself, ultimately. And they did him dirty, quite frankly. Michael Grade and Jonathan Powell and the rest of the BBC high-ups, Colin Baker didn't deserve to be treated like how he was by them. I think it is awful that they forced JNT to fire Colin Baker. And yeah, the whole kind of issues that the programme was facing at this point, none of it was Colin Baker's fault at all. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, ultimately. And yeah, I just feel sorry for the guy, ultimately. I feel like he deserved better, his Doctor deserved better, and the show deserved better. Really, it deserved to be at least respected enough to just kind of, by people like Michael Grade and Jonathan Powell, those people should have just let the programme and Colin just get on with it. You know, even if they didn't care much for it themselves, you know, I feel like you should just put your personal feelings to one side when, you know, you're in a professional you know, in a professional place like that. But yeah, I don't want to turn this whole ranking video into some kind of rant against Michael Grade and Jonathan Powell, because yeah, there's just, it's digging up stuff from what, nearly 40 years ago now, and yeah, it's just not the right place to be doing it. Anyway, so yeah, that's that. But anyway, so there's my Sixth Doctor TV story ranking. But what did you think? Did you agree with my ranking or not? And what would your own ranking be? Please let me know in the comments section below. Anyway, so thanks for watching, hope you liked it. Please don't forget to press that subscribe button below, as well as press the bell icon at the side of it, so that you'll stay notified of when all my new videos come out. This channel currently has 1,075 subscribers as of the time of writing and recording this video. But if we can get to 2,500 by the end of this year, then I will do another Q&A where you can ask me whatever questions you want. Just keep them polite, please. Also, please rate, and I shall see you all in another video. So, until next time, bye bye!